Also, welcome to all the fellows of NAPE, all our NAPE members who are present at this presentation, and other guests that have joined this meeting today. During this meeting, we'll have a presentation on the evaluation of the petroleum systems in the Anambra Basin, the 1D and 3D modeling insight on the prospectivity of the basin. And this talk is being sponsored by Jubical Energy Resources and NMPC NSERV. So I'll ask the secretary of the chapter just to show the agenda for today's meeting. So the meeting will try and be as quick as possible so we can get to the main topic of discussion for today. So we're not going to do long speeches. We'll just go straight to the introduction of the speaker and the presentation by the speaker. And this will be followed by questions and answers, and then NAPE announcements. Then any words from the NAPE president-elect or the president if he is able to join, and also the vice president of NAPE, who are both in Nigeria. And then there'll be a vote of thanks and the networking session. So we'll go straight to the business of the day, which is a presentation for today. Like I said, it's on 1D modeling and prospectivity of the Anambra Basin. And the presentation will be by Oshodi. Now, we members of NAPE UK all know Alex. He did a presentation to us last year, and he's back again. So it's like his second missionary journey. Alex, you're welcome to this meeting, and thank you for accepting our invitation to talk to us again. Alex is a geoscientist, and he has about 18 years experience in oil and gas exploration and development, specializing in petroleum systems analysis, seismic interpretation, and subsurface evaluations. He also does geological modeling for hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation. Alex has a lot of experience. He's worked in frontier and mature basins around the world on regional and field-scale projects. He has been a part of multiple integrated subsurface research, exploration, and development projects across basins in West Africa, in countries like Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Benin, Nigeria, of course, and Equatorial Guinea. He's also done some work in the Orange Basin and offshore Namibia, as well as East Africa, the Gulf of Aden, offshore Kenya and Mozambique. He's worked in the North Sea. So you can see Alex has a lot of experience from different parts of the world. Alex obtained his first degree in applied geology from the Federal University of Technology in Akure, and a master's degree in petroleum geochemistry from the University of Newcastle. Alex is very interested in the next generation of geoscientists and acts as a mentor for young geoscientists, and also provides a platform through cricket in Nigeria. Alex, I didn't know that about you. We learn every day, and he uses this to help mentor and guide inner city teenagers in Lagos through school and on to university. So Alex, you're welcome, and thank you for accepting our invitation to talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So Alex, you'll have to share your screen. Unfortunately, due to technical issues, we can't see Alex. So we just have to believe that it's Alex at the other end of the microphone. So Alex, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for having me, NAPI UK and NAPI Nigeria. It's a pleasure to be here again. Thank you, Doc, for the introduction. It's, as I said, it's a pleasure to be here again to present this research study that was carried out a few years back on behalf of NNPC and SERV, who actually were the ones responsible for the project coming to life, and Juvical Energy Resources, who acted as the main project manager and executor on this job. All protocols observed. Thank you to the president of NAPE, Nigeria, and all the executives in NAPE, as well as all fellows. Now I'll start with this presentation on the evaluating the petroleum systems in the Anambra Basin, a 1D and 3D modeling insight, and that's on the prospectivity of the basin. So basically, we'll go through an outline, look at an introduction, look at the objectives, we'll look into the geological framework of the Anambra Basin, we'll look at the basin modeling methodology, we'll look at some of the key findings, and we'll look at the conclusions and recommendations. It's also important to note that one of my colleagues, Tubosun Wolabi, has been giving small insights into this study over the last 6-7 months. NAPE Benin chapter, then he also did a lot of presentations on this during the last international conference and exhibition. So I have he has set a lot of standards that I have to try and meet up to. So I hope I'm able to pass the message across as good as he did over all the presentations he has done. So basically, the Anambra Basin covers about 6,000 square kilometers. It's a petroliferous basin in Nigeria, which is also an inland sedimentary basin, falls under the Cretaceous inland basins in the country, in Nigeria. Its position places its base as overlying the angular unconformity of the southern Benue Trough and partly above the nonconformity of the crystalline basement in its western margin, its westernmost margin. Its prospectivity has been, it's looked at being prospective in terms of crude oil based on the seeps, gas shows, then outright discoveries, which have been made in parts of it, in the southern parts of it. This presentation evaluates the basins, petroleum systems using 1D and 3D modeling, and we hope to assess the hydrocarbon potential, focusing on source rock maturity, migration pathways, and traps with the available data that we have in the basin. Some of the issues that we know, the basin, despite its proximity to the Niger Delta, it remains very underexplored in terms of when you look at its size. There are very few places that have seismic coverage within the area, so there's sparse well data as well. Then the complexities associated with the geologic history within the Benue Trough / Anambra Basin also makes exploration quite difficult. Like the methodology that was used in the 50s, 40s, before oil was found in Niger Delta, are not really applicable to finding very quick oil in the Anambra Basin. So complexities are there. So more data will be required to be able to understand it. Then what we also hope to do with this study is use the available data we have to understand its full potential and see how we can remove the uncertainties, look at minimizing uncertainties associated with exploration, and look at how to focus exploration direction with the information we have to make it more successful. So the study objective is to evaluate the hydrocarbon potential of the basin using 1D and 3D modeling, along with regional geologic information and available data sets, and look at potential key exploration targets within the basin. So we're looking at the structural and stratigraphic framework. The entire project looked at structural and stratigraphic framework. We looked at source rock characterization from geochemical data available from wells. We'll look at constraining the heat flow and thermal history based on the regional information on the basin and what we know to be in play as regards the tectonic history within the basin. We're looking at, with that information, we'll be able to look at the potential timing for hydrocarbon generation and expulsion from the source rocks modeled within the basin. Then we also look at migration trapping and seal integrity within the basin as well. So for the tectonal, we'll look at the regional geology because this information plays a big role in building your basin model. So we all know about the tectonic stretching in the Aptan Cenomanian, in the Anambra platform and the Benue Trough, and this caused deltaic river and marine deposits alongside volcanic activity, and structural shifts and folding within the Benue Trough. Then during the Turonian to Santonian, you had a major sea level rise. This also coincides with major ocean anoxic events around the world, and this saw the South Atlantic connecting to Tethys via the Benue Trough, and we had the deposition of the Eziaku Ogu shales, which are known source rocks within the basin based on reports and well information. Then we also had the deposition of the Nkalagu, Igumale limestones that is formed in the basin center, while sandstones of the Amasiri, Agbani, and Makodi were deposited in the lower Benue Trough. And we also have geological maps to show the distribution of these environments as well across the basin. Then we had major tectonic shifts, with Santonian or uplifts, and in the Campania Maastrichtian, we had this ended deposition in the central basin, shifting deposition westwards into the Anambra Basin. So while the Afikpo syncline developed in the east, so erosion from the Abakaliki area removed about 3,000 meters of sediments from that area and deposited them within the Anambra Basin. And that's evident in the exposure of the Aptian Albian and early Cretaceous sediments that you see being exposed in parts of Abakaliki today. The Aso River group is majority of the surface geology in that axis. Then you had the Abakaliki uplifts, supplement sediments for the early Niger Delta, forming the Oweli, Afikpo, and Otobi sandstones. And this continued into the Maastrichtian with the coal from the Mamu Formation, while the Enugu and Nkporo shales represent deeper marine deposits, which are also good source rocks in the area as well. Then in the early Paleocene, rising sea levels deposited Imo Shale and the Umuna sands in the southern parts of the basin and in the eastern Anambra Basin, forming deep marine shales extending into the Atlantic. These shales are considered the lateral equivalents of the Akata Formation in the Niger Delta. Then as sea level fell, the Nanka sands formed in the Anambra Basin and the Bindi and Amiki sandstone in the Afikpo Basin, corresponding to the Agbada Formation in the Niger Delta, and this initiated the progressional development of the tertiary Niger Delta that we have today. So basically, from the information we know, the Anambra Basin is structurally linked to the Benue Trough, exhibits significant tectonic deformation associated with the Santonian and orogenia as well. And this deformation created several sub-basins and associated faults, which provide potential hydrocarbon generation and accumulation. And that's a magnetic image of the depth basement showing sub-basins present within the Anambra Basin. Then we know about the basic stratigraphy, the pre-Santonian deposits that we know present in that area based on some of the studies we carried out and regional information. The early Cretaceous Asu River groups, Eziaku, which is of the Cenomanian, the Ogu Shale, which is Turonian. Then we do have post-Santonian deposits as well, which are the Nkporo group, the Mamu Formation, and the Ajali sandstones and the Unska Formation as well within the basin. So this is a cartoon of a cross-section for northeast southwest for the basin, showing all the different stratigraphic units we have there, and some of this information is also controlled by wells which have been drilled in that area. And we can see the boundary of the Niger Delta Basin with the Anambra Basin here. Then we have the Onitsha sub-basin, the Ankpa sub-basin, and the Lafia sub-basin within these areas, and all separated by highs: the Calabar Hinge Line, the Unsuka High, and the Kadarko High. So the methodology basically is we are looking at integrating geochemistry, biostratigraphy, sedimentology, petrophysics, and seismic and magnetic gravity, along with whatever regional reports or information we have, as well as outcrop data and information. It's important to note that this research project was also a collaboration between academia and industry. So we had a lot of information. We know there's a lot of work that's been done across the basin in terms of within academia, and we have to give them, compliment them, and really thank them for the work that they did, because a lot of the information we put into this model would not have been possible without the inputs from a lot of PhDs and professors in the academic sector in Nigeria. So the modeling, 1D modeling, basically is the first phase, which focuses on trying to calibrate and understand the heat flow data and reconstruct the thermal history and determine the source rock maturation within the basin. The 3D basin modeling approach basically takes the information from the 1D models, and we try and distribute the information that we've gotten from the 1D models across the basin to have a 3D perspective. So it's almost like property modeling that you would be doing in your normal geomodeling exercise for reservoir characterization or reservoir modeling. But what we are doing now is we are distributing heat flows, and this is over geologic time, not current time. So a lot of information goes into trying to understand, and what we want to do is replicate the basin's history to be able to constrain this information through geologic time. So the first phase of the job involved interpretation of aeromagnetic data, and a lot of work was done by the professors and PhDs in academia, and I must compliment the work they did. They were able to establish the 3 sub-basins based on the aeromag data and the sediment pile thicknesses which we have. So we're looking at sediment pile thicknesses of 12,700 in the Lafia, 13,700 in the Ankpa, 28,700 in the Onitsha sub-basin, and 11,500 around the Afikpo syncline axis of the basin. And this information acts as the base of our model, especially when we are carrying out petroleum systems modeling and evaluations. So understanding your sediment pile thicknesses is key. Limited seismic information was available in the Onitsha sub-basin, a lot of it 2D lines, which were provided for us, thankfully, by NMPC and SEV, which also gave us insights as to stratigraphy and structuration in parts of the southern Benue Trough. As we said in the earlier parts, it's about 62,000 square kilometers in size. The seismic data only covers about maybe a fifth or a sixth of the entire basin area. So it gives us insight. It allows us understand what's going on in the subsurface within that area. And we're also able to correlate the seismic events to wells that are present within the area. But we also have a lot of area that we need to understand. So, but this started as a base for where we could extrapolate our surfaces to other parts of the basin. And with that, we're able to generate some maps for the area. And as you can see, this is the near top Unsuka formation depth map and time map for the basin. And basically, with that information, we now looked, with the limited information, we can't create a basin model for the entire basin using the seismic. So we looked at other information, published reports, a lot of field studies carried out within academia by students, by lecturers, by researchers. And we took all that information and we looked at outcrop coverage information for all the different structural features within that area, looked at the reports, deep strike measurements, well data, old wells, legacy wells from when they were carrying out exploration in the 50s to wells that are producing within the area and in the Onitsha sub-basin. And all that information was integrated to create depth maps for the surfaces, for the different lithostratigraphic units within the basin. And at least we had well control up to a point. When you look at like the Unkporo group, we had well control up to the Unkporo, but for things like the Ogu, Eziaku, Asu River, a lot of this was done utilizing information from regional geology, some of the aeromag and gravity interpretations, as well as published reports within the area. With that information, we're able to create a cross-sectional model first of our formations from northeast to southwest, which shows us all the different lithostratigraphic units within the basin using the basement depth basement map from aeromag as the bottom boundary. And we also used information to outcrop information and elevations for the top surface boundaries. Now, after that, we now looked at a generalized basin modeling workflow. We're looking at the actual information we are putting it. So we have geochemical data, kerogen type, organic richness, and that will give us insights on generation potential. We looked at geometry, stratigraphy, depth maps, fault geometry, well log data, seismic data, all that information, along with, for the boundary conditions part, we have to understand heat flow, surface temperatures, sediment water temperatures, and the paleowater depth history within the basin. Then we also have to look at the timing of tectonic events and compaction and basement lithology and stuff like that. And all that goes into our output will now give us a burial history and thermal model, petroleum generation, migration, accumulation, and we can look at those in accumulation plots, maturity plots, and transformation ratio plots as well. So I've spoken about the integration of the data, but this is more detailed. The information obtained from the published geological information was used to create a near realistic model of the Anambra Basin. Since we had data limitations across the entire basin, what we're looking at is creating something that is near realistic. And this information will enable us establish the following, which will be taken into consideration during the model building process. You know, the expected sediment thicknesses within our study area from regional maps and from the aeromag, which we've seen, and the thickness and ages of basin lithostratigraphic units within our study area, which we established from seismic and integrated with deep and strike measurements and outcrop data information and well data that was not within the seismic volume itself. Crustal lithology is expected within the study area because crustal lithologies also control heat flow into the basins, and that way, if we properly understand the crustal lithologies, we can calibrate our geochemical properties or geochemical measurements from the well to properly, calibrate the wells to the calibrate the models to the available geochemical data to properly understand the heat flow histories within the basin. Then we also looked at things like what were the pre-reef thicknesses, because these are also controlled. So we assigned the pre-reef thickness of 115,000 feet. Crustal lithology that we used was granitic because we took into consideration all previous orogenies within the area and subsequent emplacement of granites in the basement complexes flanking the basin in that area. We have the younger Pan-African granites in the Gara axis all the way to Auchi. Then we also have the granites within the urban massif. So generally, we look at the crustal lithologies there as being more granitic rather than gneissic or basaltic in nature. Then with that information as well, we could properly also model paleowater depths using information from regional geology wells biostrat data that we had. So with all that information, we were able to get 9 depth maps from the seismic interpretation project. We also created base horizon maps for these surfaces. Surface layer was created using surface elevation from well data and Google Earth. A depth to the basement map was created from interpretation of regional magnetic data. Ages that were assigned were from biostrat information from wells, which were tied to the seismic surfaces and also extrapolated along with outcrop data and other available well data within the area. Then petroleum systems elements were assigned to these layers created from maps, from the maps based on regional geologic information, geochemical reports that we have, and results from petrophysical evaluations and geochemical evaluations we carried out on the data that was made available. So the building workflow basically we had to start by creating a 3D model, but 3D model without any properties. So this involved faults, data input, fault modeling, QC, and smoothing of maps. Then after we created the layers, we now went and extracted 1D models. We had 1D models for the wells in the axis, but we needed 1D models. Nobody drills in the kitchen. Everybody drills on structural heights for oil. So we as basin modelers have to go to where the kitchen areas were. That's why the aeromag was important. So we had to extract 1D models, pseudo models from the 3D data in the areas where we had potential source kitchens. That's in the deepest parts of the sub basins that we had. And we'll take that information from the 1D model. We we QC the inputs, and we review the burial history at that location. We look at the boundary conditions, settings. We carry out simulations. Now those outputs, we now look at the calibration. If we are not calibrating properly to available well data, we carry out that same process again. But once we are done and we are happy with the calibrations, we move it to create the trends, property trends that we're going to distribute across the 3D model. We carry out property modeling, trend assignments. We define the petrol charge layer. Then we'll carry out simulation and sensitivity analysis on the model, and we start looking at results and outputs. So this is basically, if you looked at the earlier slides, you'll see the surface geology of the Anambra Basin that we had from the geological maps, old geological maps and current ones. And you can see that our 3D model has similar surface geology in terms of is replicating the surface geology of the Anambra Basin. And this is the layer creation side of things. And we can now assign lithologies to those layers as well. Then we can define the fascies for each particular layer, and we can also restrict it based on what we know of the regional geology. So we are not just going to say there's 60,000 square kilometers of Asu River group source rock. We have to look at the regional geology, assign source rock properties to restricted areas within the basin, because we know based on what we know of the geology, the Asu River group is not extending further west. So we have to look at assigning all those fishes. What's our reservoir? What are source rocks? What are our potential seals? What rock properties do we expect based on the gross depositional environment within this time in the geology? And those are all the informations that we put into the model. So for our results, we now start looking at the four 1D models that were extracted across the sub-basins. The control selection areas for these models, that subsidence curves, stretching factors, and PWD, were unique to each sub-basin. So each sub-basin has its own uniqueness as to its tectonic and history and development. Then pseudo wells were extracted and they calibrated. We measured visionary reflectance models within that area. So we are looking at, we were able to constrain the basin's geothermal history. Boundary conditions, bottom hole, there's a water depth, sediment water interface temperatures were used to define or control basic thermal energy conditions affecting source rock maturation as well. Then currently located onshore as a precursor to Prograding Delta, water depth trends model should show a shallowing. So we were able to also achieve that. Then the sediment water interface temperatures served as the upper limit of the boundary conditions for heat transfer within the basin, functioning as a product of the paleowater depth and aiding and constraining the geothermal gradients through geologic time in the basin. So that's the location of the pseudo wells that were extracted over the basin. That's the information that we're able to, that's some of the calibration information. The stretching factors are about 1.6 Mackenzie stretching factors in the basin. We're able to properly, these two lines at the top here is basically our tectonic subsidence and our model subsidence are matching. So that means we got the subsidence history of the basin correct based on the sediments infill within the basin. From our paleowater depths, we are seeing maximum water depths in the lower Cretaceous, which coincide with the deposition of most of the sedimentary units within that area. We also have a shallowing of the water depth to this point here between the Cretaceous and the Tertiary, where we see the first, before the deposition of the Imo shale, and we see a further, with the marine transgression that occurred, we now see increase in water depth and deposition of the Imo shale. Then we now have erosion till present day. So basically we're able to do that. We see the heat flow history, there's a spike in heat flow as well. And with that information, we now look at calibration. So does our model mimic the geologic history of the Anambra Basin? Yes. We have a stretching phase, but we have low sediment accumulation rates because at the time of the opening up of the basin, the Anambra Basin was not the center of deposition. It was in the southern Benue Trough. So when you're looking at deposition of the Asu River Group, Eziako and Co., you have low sediment accumulation rates because it was more deep water. The sea was actually further down. So you're depositing at low sediment accumulation rates. By the time we get to the post-drift thermal sag phase, we now have a high influx of sediments, high sediment accumulation rates, which now filling up to the Cretaceous Tertiary. Then you now have exposure because of the progradation and the southward movement of the sea. Then subsequently, you now have an increase in sea level and the deposition of the Imo Shale in this area. So basically, we've been able to do that. We have temperature plots for the basin. We've also been able to calibrate our model to the available visionary reflectance data. So we're happy with our heat flow calibration through geologic time in the basin. Unfortunately, we didn't have any bottom hole temperature data in most of the wells, so we weren't able to calibrate present day temperatures. So the modeling from 1D identified two potential plays within the basin in terms of charge from source rocks. We have the upper Cretaceous and the lower Cretaceous play. Then most of the hydrocarbon is from pre-Santonian source rocks, began in the late Cretaceous, mainly in the Onitsha and Ankpa subbasins, with minimal generation within the Lafia subbasins. Then the Nkporo Shale, which is a post-Santonian source rock, has some minor expulsion and generation within the Onitsha basin. Then overall, the hydrocarbon generation aligns with observed maturity and transformation ratios we have in the model and observed maturities that we have from well data. And here we have a general expulsion plot. We see it taper out, but by the time we do a cumulative expulsion plot, you see there are different timings for different source rocks. The Asu River starts generating and finishes just before 80 million years ago. The Eziaku starts immediately after the Asu River group. Then you have Eziaku for the Ankpa sub-basin starting as well later. So it's all, you have source rocks of the same age, but generating and expelling at different times across the basin. So, as I said, the information from the 1D models was used to create trends for boundary conditions. This trend data has been sent across, and since the survey area is about 6,000 square kilometers, the wells and the trends generated from each sub-basin were used to populate those 3D models. And we have a cross-sectional view, northeast, southwest, across the basin that shows us the maturity from across the basin. And we can see the Onitsha sub-basin has very high maturities. The Ankpa sub-basin also has gas window maturities, early gas window maturities, and the Lafia sub-basin also have early gas window maturities. And we can see that there's early oil to mid oil window maturities across the entire basin. And the oil window occurs generally between 7,500 and 15,800 feet within this basin. And the model Cretaceous sales associated with the Asu River group are well in the gas window, while the Eziaku and the Ogu have late oil window maturities to early gas window maturities within the basin. That's the transformation ratio. We can see that TR values are almost 100% for most of the model source rocks across all parts of the basins. Apart from the post-Santonian sediments, which have about 60%, minimum 60% in parts of the basins, and as high as, across the sub-basins, but as high as 100% in the Onitsha sub-basin. So we also look at expulsion and generation from these source rocks, and we've identified the catching areas based on the sub-basins, and we can see the distribution of maturities and generation and expulsion from the different source rocks across the basin. The one source rock that we believed is laterally extensive across the entire basin is at the Eziaku and Ogu. And we looked at it from that perspective, and we did model good source rock quality in most parts of the basin across. The Asu River group we restricted to the Onitsha sub-basin. The Umporo we restricted to the Onitsha sub-basin. So basically, the Umporo and Enugu we restricted to the Onitsha sub-basin. So we have good maturity. We can see the expulsion plots, expulsion maps for the different source rock groups. This is increasing in age. This is the Umporo, and we go all the way like that, and we see this is Asu, this is Eziaku. I think this is Ogu. We restricted Ogu, sorry, it's Eziaku that we carried out. Then Umporo is restricted here. And we can see from the migration vectors that we have across the basin in 2D that majority of the migration is going up deep because of the plumbing and the way the sediments are aligned. So we are sending from the Onitsha sub-basin into the Ankpa sub-basin, and we are sending charge from the Ankpa sub-basin into the Lafia sub-basin. So migration is up deep with the sediments in that direction. So, and we also established that the onset of generation for the Asu River group it's 6 million years. We also established that expulsion starts about 3 million years for the Asu River group within the Onitsha sub-basin. So hydrocarbon trapping in the sub-basin was limited by sparse subsurface data, especially within these with the model. So lack of fault data that we have, lack of subsurface data outside the Onitsha sub-basin did not allow us to look at putting, barriers to flow, and that was due to the poor seismic coverage. But we excluded those faults, and basically most of the trapping that we are seeing based on the model we've created is as a result of changes in deep and fascist changes in terms of lithologies, putting the reservoir fascists based on what we know as the gross depositional environment here, and lithology variations causing barriers to flow. And in the Onitsha sub-basin, trapping may be linked to growth faults, which we've seen in the seismic as well. But this remains unconfirmed in Ankpa and Lafia sub-basins, because now the 3D model focused on trapping mechanisms, as I've said, based on deep changes, fascist variations. And we also use the hybrid migration model, combining Darcy flow and flow path models to allow us look at what potential trapping features would be. One of the things we look at in exploration is the Statoil Golden Zones concept, which basically tells us that 90% of the conventional hydrocarbons in the subsurface are trapped within a particular temperature isotherm. So the 60 to 120 degree isotherm. And that's because with temperatures lower than 60 degrees, you're going to be looking at the risk of biodegradation and poor seal integrity. And once you go above 120 degrees, you are going into the expulsion zone. So those are overpressure zones. You have high kicks in pressure. You have clay mineralogy variations causing high pressure as well within this deeper depth. So overpressure development is a lot at that point in time. So ideally, most of the oil and gas reserves around the world fall within this area. So when we are dealing with exploration projects like this, and we are looking at basin modeling studies, we are looking to establish that to help us look at where we target our exploration. And with that, we were able to identify optimal hydrocarbon accumulation zones. And this is because we're able to properly calibrate the heat flow within the basin. And if we're looking at a situation where even where we've had wells that have been drilled, most of them only penetrated the top of the golden zone, indicating potential deeper exploration prospects across these basins. Then additionally, the risk zone for biodegradation is about 5,000 feet, which could indicate poor seal integrity at these shallower levels. So we're looking at saying, okay, fine, if we want to look at carrying out seismic data acquisition across these basins, we can optimally target particular depths within the subsurface and ensure that frequencies are high enough to properly image these areas, rather than just acquire and not properly process the data to optimally image certain depths. So some of the 3D modeling outputs is what we now looked at is based on some of the traps and accumulations we found. We're looking at, okay, what's in particular areas, what are the optimal golden zone temperatures that we expect. So these are maps that show areas of overpressure, areas of good accumulation based on the accumulations that we have, are the accumulations at risk of biodegradation, is it potentially too high a pressure to drill to? So we've been able to identify biodegradation risk zones, overpressure zones within the basins. We've been able to identify potential accumulations, but remember, we don't have any seismic data in this area. So there's these, as I said, the model is not in terms 100% because of the limited data we have. But based on this, we've been able to see that there are potential accumulations that are ideal, fall within the golden zone. There are some that fall within areas where we have biodegradation risk, across the basin in different parts. So the potential is there if there is enough data to properly, like update the model and have a better understanding. And we also see that migration vectors for hydrocarbons expelled show that majority of hydrocarbons accumulated in the modeled reservoirs are migrating from the Onitsha sub-basin into suitable structures in the Ankpa and Lafia sub-basins. Modeled accumulations within the sand freshes are suited with the Ogu Unkporo groups, and some of them run the risk of biodegradation due to model temperatures in those layers being less than 60 degrees. So if we are saying majority of the oil that is being generated from the Onitsha sub-basin is going to the Lafia and Ankpa, and the oil generated in the Ankpa is going to the Lafia, the question we'll now ask ourselves as well is, the oil in the Onitsha, where is it coming from? So the proximity from the seismic section we showed shows you that the Niger Delta, the northern depot belt is there. So we have a belief that the migration, the oil in the Onitsha sub-basin is migrating from the northern delta into the Onitsha sub-basin, and subsequently those ones are migrating from the Onitsha sub-basin into the Ankpa and Lafia. So this can only be established if we have proper subsurface data going forward. But we hope that this gives some insight, to push for, further exploration and get some more subsurface data within these basins as we go along. And this is a generalized petroleum system event chart for the basin, and the critical moments basically seal timing relative to reservoir deposition, as well as hydrocarbon generation. Then we're also looking at preservation of trapped hydrocarbons is also an issue as regards biodegradation risk and within some of the reservoirs that we modeled. And basically, the 3D model, we've developed a 3D model to reduce exploration risk and uncertainties in the basin, and have identified two possible hydrocarbon plays, which is the pre-Santonian and the post-Santonian. Preliminary results indicate hydrocarbon migration for the Onitsha sub-basin to the Ankpa and Lafia sub-basins. The golden zone was identified as an 8,000-foot subsurface region with varying depths across the basin and depth limits. While the post and pre-Santonian source kitchens provide sufficient hydrocarbons, trapping efficiency is low due to the timing of hydrocarbon charge relative to reservoir and seal deposition. So considering the volumes that we generated and expelled from some of these sub-basins, what we are seeing in accumulations are very low. But that's also because we've not factored in structural traps into these models as well. So that's another thing we have to look into. Then reducing uncertainties in trapping mechanisms requires additional 2D and 3D seismic data acquisition across the basin, reprocessing existing vintages, and reinterpretation to improve understanding and visualization of subsurface geologic features across the entire basin. Then further seismic survey, we also look at recommending further seismic surveys and well data could provide more detailed insights, particularly in unexplored areas of the basin. So I'd like to thank NNPC and SERV for providing the data and giving us as a team of academia and industry, and Juvical for giving us the platform to be able to carry out this project. We also thank NAPE UK for the opportunity to present this work to all of you. I hope I've been able to meet up to the standards that my colleague Tubosun had set before, and I look forward to your questions and any insights that you may have as regards what I've presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. I almost wanted you to continue on and on and on and on, because this was a very interesting presentation. We understand that this is like the first look at a detailed 3D basin modeling for the Anambra Basin. And it's a basin that is one of our frontier basins. There have been some discoveries in the Anambra Basin, as we know. Among the limitations we have in the Anambra Basin is a lack of data, which you've highlighted very well. Not just well data, but also seismic data. And we know that there's a lot of data coming from the outcrops surrounding the basin. So all the outcrops in the around the Enugu-Port Harcourt Expressway, around Nsukka, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of data from the outcrops, so very little subsurface data. I guess people would have a lot of questions on this presentation. But there's just something that struck me as we were talking. We were talking about source rocks and so on and so forth. Is there any potential for shale gas in the Anambra Basin or shale oil? Because we know around Lopanta there's an oil shale in outcrop.
I wanted to put that in my presentation, but I don't want to say much. I believe the potential for, and you noticed when I was talking, I talked about conventional. That's when I talked about the golden zone. We looked at potential for conventional resources. One of the things we've not really considered, and I think it should be the next phase of, apart from, trying to increase on an understanding of the basin, because the major thing about it is when we think about it geologically. I'll answer your question, but I have to say this. One thing about it geologically, the minute the Niger Delta started producing, all exploration focus shifted there, and we abandoned. We have oil seepages in the Afikpo Abakaliki axis.
Yeah.
We had the situation because, like, I'm wondering why people have not, maybe people haven't queued in, but when you look at my migration vectors for gas, remember 2-3 years ago when they were drilling a water well and they hit hydrocarbon gas. Nobody has established whether it's gas associated, that's in the Nsukka or Enugu axis, where they hit gas. Nobody has established whether it's gas associated with the coals or it's thermogenic gas.
Yeah.
Do you get me?
Well,
based on this information that we've done, yes, there's potential for
TBM,
for unconventionals. Because when you think about, am I still sharing my screen?
Yes, yes.
When you think about this in terms of what I say here, so we have to understand the geologic history of our basin is that we had rapid deposition from the Aptian Albian till the Santonian. And in most cases, some of these source rocks were just peaking in terms of their expulsion, or may not have even peaked. But we look at it, so we look at expulsion profiles here. This is about 10 million tons in terms of mass. And this is 100,000, let me see, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is another 10 million tons per square kilometer. Now look at the expulsion profiles. All of a sudden, boom, it dies. This one dies. Everything just dies around the Santonian. Now we know that expulsion is not, when you expel, some of the oil that you've generated is not everything you expel. There's some left in between that turns into gas when you now reach higher maturities. So we have a lot of unexpelled hydrocarbons present within some of those source rocks. So identifying those source rocks is key. And like this study has put together an understanding of the depth to basement. We've established maturity. We've established that we have over 90%, over 100% transformation of organic matter to hydrocarbons within any source rock layers modeled within potential source rock layers modeled in the basin. So there is that potential. In the Afikpo Abakaliki axis, especially the Abakaliki axis, it may be a problem because you have the volcanics that have intruded majority of the Asu River group. A lot of the lead zinc deposition we have there is associated with the Asu River group.
Yeah.
But in Anambra Basin, I think the potential for unconventionals is there, but it's now the exploration strategy that needs to be applied to be able to identify the potential for these unconventionals there that we need to start looking at or researching.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. So I'll hand over to General Secretary for the chapter. He'll coordinate the other questions and answers. Obeyemi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iwobi. And thank you, Alex, for the presentation. So this is our question and answer session. Our coordinator has started it, and Dr. Iwobi has started the question, so we'll just continue. I think there's a hand raised. Quickly state your name, your affiliation, and go straight to the question. Yeah, just for us to take more questions, so you don't need to appreciate the presenter. We can do that after during the networking session. So over to you, Mr. Dayo Okeowo. Unmute and ask your question.
Are we looking at the questions from the messages for the Q&A?
Yes,
Should I look at that?
Yes, we'll get to them. We wanted to take the one, Mr. Dayo Okeowo, those that raised their hands first, before we look into that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, since Mr. Ayo, then let's go to Mr. Isaac Ode. Forgive me if I've not pronounced your name clearly.
Ode.
Okay, it seems you can't unmute. If you can't unmute, so that means you need to then type it out. So I'm just going to read, so not to waste time, I'm going to read the questions that we have. Yeah, so the first one is from Mr. Kingsley. It says, how reliable were the data used in constraining the models?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Migration. Okay, go ahead.
Mr.
Yeah.
Isaac Ode is on now.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Hi, Alex. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
So while explaining the tectonostratigraphic of the basin,
yeah.
So we talked about a shift in depot belt. So my question would be, when those depot belts were
sorry.
There's a bit of an echoing. I don't know if it's coming from me.
Okay, Mr. Dayo, okay, well, can you hold on a bit? Let Mr. Isaac Ode ask, then Mr. Dayo, you can ask next.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So my question will be, whilst depot belts were shifting, what happened to the sediment source? Do we maintain a consistent sediment source throughout the basin history, or do we have also shifting sediment source? Whichever is the case, what's the implication of that to actually the basin architecture vis-a-vis your study in the modeling and stuff?
So when you're saying this, the sediment source is the Benue River,
right?
You get me? Eroding, that's the sediment source. We have sediment source. We had the Niger River and the Benue River. They hadn't met up at that time. But when you think about the basin history, and I said it there, you had majority of the sedimentation coming into the main Benue Trough, with the Anambra Basin being a platform on the side. Do you get me? So minor sedimentation, which we can see from the geohistory profiles that I showed you. Unfortunately, I put stuff over it. So you can see your Asu River group, Eziaku, and Co. The sediment supply is much lower. Is when even within the southern Benue Trough, you had low sediment accumulation rates in the early parts of the basin's history, and they start peaking when you start having the Eziaku Ogu, and that is what impacted the maturation, the high level of sediment accumulation. Now, when you now had the Santonian, basically what you now did was that you uplifted the main Benue trough, and those sediments were exposed, and automatically those sediments they're being dumped into the Anambra Basin.
So they worked in essence.
Yeah, so basically then you also still had the River Niger still bringing in stuff. Do you get me? Not as high as what you would have on the Benue River side, but you still had sediments coming in from the west into the basin, into the platform areas. That's why in the understanding of the Anambra Basin's history, there are certain parts where you said you have fluvial deltaic type sediments also coming in on the western parts in those images that I showed in the beginning of the presentation. So I'll not say we looked at it in terms of in detail, but we did look at what we considered and that's not the area I worked on fully. I just took all the information they gave me and created a model. Do you get my point? But basically,
Right.
We did look at all that information, the interplay, and why we looked at it, because there's a question here. We looked at it as not only the interplay of sediment supply, but also the impact on the gross depositional environments and lithology variations across the basin, which we now use to control migration. So for Mr. Kingsley Ejairu, those are the things we looked at. The scale at which we were able to apply it was based on the well data information and the regional reports we had. Do you get me? As I said, we have no subsurface data, but at least we were able to, as regards migration distances, we put the controls that we could put in place based on the modeling exercise we're carrying out and the resolution of the model to properly limit and understand the migration based on the lithologies that we had in place from gross depositional environments.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Now, Mr. Dayo, come on now.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. Alex, thank you for this presentation. Yes. My question is, actually, I really appreciate your effort in shedding more light on this unappraised basin. Now, look at your presentations quite closely concerning the migration update. Can we have a correlation with the geothermal gradient within this basin? Because I couldn't see a plot of the actual geothermal gradient within the Afikpo area across to the Enugu Ebonyi axis. Because in those areas we could see some, of course I must tell you this, we could see some communities where we are already existing, having gas leakage in some areas in those communities.
Yeah.
Where they are drilling water wells, accidentally there's a gas peak, and gas start exporting out from those water wells, just shallow water wells.
Okay.
So can we quickly have a quick geothermal gradient information within this across to the line as to the survey to see what we're looking at? Thank you.
So the truth, yes. So what you have said now is expected. You don't expect. I won't go into much detail, but I don't have any geothermal gradient information, but I have temperature. So are you seeing the image I have here now?
Yeah, I can see.
So this blue part here, the top of this line is 60 degrees centigrade.
Okay.
The bottom is 120. Now, you have to understand that in the Afikpo area, that's where you have a lot of oil seeps within the southern Benue Trough. You have seasonal oil seeps within that area. One thing that you would look at, a lot of all these oil seeps are also biodegraded. And when you biodegrade oil, one of the primary results or one of the primary what you get primarily from biodegradation of oil is methane gas.
Okay.
So the possibilities of there being methane gas, but biogas within that area could be high because we've not established any oil pools. We've established oil seeps. These oil seeps are coming from oil pools, and these oil seeps are biodegraded. This I'm talking about. I've read reports from 1930s on the oil seeps in the southern Benue Trough. I still have some of those reports. So you would expect that in the Afikpo axis, especially if you have biogenic gas within the area. I've not drilled any wells to see that. I'm not going to dispute that fact. I'm guessing you are coming from an experienced perspective on the area. So it is possible. It is possible.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Basi. Quick one.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Nice presentation. Let me just go quickly to the point. Okay, so just I have two questions. The first one is, did you consider integrating maybe tomography data to kind of estimate the crustal thickness around the basin? So this can help you to kind of estimate.
Oh yes. So I didn't have any tomographic data, but I did have the cross 2D 2.0 model. It's a global map of crustal thicknesses across the world, and that's basically my reference. So what I look at is when I want to establish what my pre-reef thickness is, I look at the present day crustal thickness is actually lower. So I'm looking at pre-reef crustal thickness so I can properly understand my heat flow through the basin's history as the crust is thinning. So we have you have the Migmatite and Gneiss quartzite complex on one side of the Anambra Basin.
Oh.
Do you get me? And you have the urban massif on the other side. So I look at the crustal thicknesses in those areas on that map. And that's what I establish as my pre-reef thickness. So it's not to the letter. But the truth about it is that when you think about where my crustal thickness on those parts are relative to what the crustal thickness is present day, and you look at what the Mackenzie stretching factor is, it falls ideally. And with the Anambra Basin, if you consider the crustal stretching values in the Anambra Basin with that in the Southern Benue Trough, they are very different. And you consider it with what you have in the Delta, completely different. So the Niger Delta will be anything from 1.15 to 1.3. Anambra Basin is anything from 1.4 to 1.6. The Benue Trough is 1.8 and above, which also coincides and gives you an understanding of the emplacement of volcanics as well in the initial rifting period of the basin. So
yeah, so
all the
thank
information
you.
I got.
Yeah, so there is we have recent tomography data specifically for Africa, not global, and I think it captured that of Nigerian part. Maybe in the future studies, if it's important to look at it.
Oh, definitely. I think any information is ideal. I don't
you can download the tomography data at the NSF website, National Science Foundation by the US. So I think it's
beautiful. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Boss, so please take that down.
Yeah. So and then the second question I want to ask is maybe I missed that part. So the timing between the Santonian orogeny and I believe that the Santonian orogeny must have controlled most of the structuration, especially in the pre-Santonian petroleum system. So what is the timing, like the structural formation, that's the Santonian orogeny, and the maturation that you saw in Ogusheo and then Ezakusheo?
Basically, the Santonian orogeny, in terms of what are you saying? The impact of the orogeny on the shales?
Yeah, on the structuration, like for us to have accumulation, I believe that the structure must have been in place before the expulsion started.
So that this is the point now, and that's what we said. We don't have any subsurface data to image structures in that part of the Anambra Basin where we don't have data. We have information in the Onitsha sub-basin. I know the Onitsha sub-basin and the Niger Delta are quite close to each other. But in those upper parts of the basin, we don't. Now, the Santonian orogeny, you have to remember, is the focus of the Santonian orogeny is along the Afikpo-Abakaliki axis. The Anambra Basin itself was a stable platform prior to that, which now became a center for the deposition as a result of the orogeny. So this question will be more applicable in the Southern Benue Trough. Do you get my point? Than in this axis, number one. Number two, we don't have any subsurface data to even look at structures. So everything we're looking at it's a regional model based on the limited data we have. And the idea is to try and see if we can get more data to properly understand it. But this acts as like the first step in exploration. We haven't gotten to the point where we can now start deciphering structural features below. The only geophysics we had in the areas where we didn't have seismic data was magnetic data. So all we could look at was sediment packages and depth basement.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much. Because of time, we won't be taking further questions.
I need to answer Dr. Edegba's answer because Dr. Edegba is my very good friend.
If he can be brief, 1 minute.
So
I know, yeah, please.
The Santonian plays its role, but it's not a major. It doesn't play a major role like we would say in the Southern Benue. Then, as regards the KT boundary, we've not seen in the places where we had seismic data. We didn't notice. The data was not the best, but we didn't really see the KT boundary in those areas, Dr. Edegba. I hope that answered your question too.
So thank you very much, sir. So what we would do is, if you wait behind for the networking session, some of the questions can be responded to then. But I think for now we just want to continue. So for those that they need to do something else, they can do so. But of course, if you still have your questions and you want them responded to, just wait for the networking session at the end of this event. If our speaker would happily oblige. We'll just go to the speeches by our NAPI executives. I would hand over to Dr. Iwobi to introduce NAPI executives, and they can give their speeches. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a very lively and interesting discussion, and I'm sure a lot of people have a lot more questions to ask. So I can see that the president of NAPE, Mr. John Bosco Uche, is on this call. I thank you, President, for attending. I've already mentioned the president-elect, Mrs. Ajayi, and the vice president, Ehi Bazwaye. So I'd like to invite the president of NAPE to say a few words to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, our dear UK Europe Chapter Coordinator, Dr. Iwobi, and again, Opeyemi as well, our SecGen, for the great work you guys have been doing on behalf of NAPE, and of course, the Geoscience Global Community. Let me say that, I also enjoyed, let me join my voice, I enjoyed the presentation. I know I joined slightly late, but beginning of the presentation, and I think the in-depth of work that Jovico has been doing in this basin, again, as witnessed today, has indeed shown that we have what it takes to take this country to the next level in terms of exploring for more oil and gas in the basins that we have. This time around, the Frontier Basin, and this time around, the Cretaceous Basin as well. I really want to say thank you, Jovico. Thank you, Alex, for this insightful discussion and quite engaging and quite technical, I must say. So the only thing I want to say is that we need to find a way to take this, translate these studies and research inside into reality. That's where the platform that NAPE definitely will have to provide. In the recent time, following various engagements we've had with key stakeholders in the government, they are now actually listening to us, trying to hear from us how we can, provide more energy to this country. And this basin, I believe, is definitely one of them. So all I can say is that we're here to work together with you, provide a platform, and I'm sure the future is going to be bright for this country. We still have a lot of untapped potentials in this basin, as seen today. On that note, I want to say thank you, everybody that joined, but also specifically our UK Europe chapter, to say thanks for everything you continue to do in this and providing the platform alongside other chapters that we have. And we're here to work together to continue to move NAPE to greater heights. So with that, I will hand back to you, Dr. Iwobi, as we look ahead for greater things to come in your chapter.
Yeah, thank you, President, for your kind words. I think we'll just go on to the next thing on our agenda for today. Sec, please, could you just show the agenda? I think we just have some announcements, and then we'll go on to the networking. I can see our president-elect has her hand up. Please, could you unmute, and if you have a few words for us also.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Oh, I didn't raise my hand up.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Maybe it was an error. But I just want to say thank you to the speaker. Our president has said it all. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate how excellently you presented, made your presentation and also answered the questions. And we believe that there will be more time, next time when we need you and call upon you, you make yourself available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Secretary, could you just have a quick look at the announcements?
Definitely. Thank you so much. So for the announcement, I think for those who are joining a NAPI event for the first time, just to give you a brief introduction on who we are. So the full meaning of NAPI is the Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists, and it started as the Lagos Society of Geologists and Geophysicists by Akwemeno Oteri. And then it started by with just 10 people attending the inaugural meeting at Federal Palace Hotel in Lagos in 1975. And today we are over 12,000 strong individual member association with over 173 supporting corporate members. Our vision is to be the preferred professional Petroleum Geoscience Association with a global reach. And you can see that today with the UK Europe chapter presenting hosting this technical meeting. We don't just have a chapter in the UK, we also have in America too, in the US. And so I'll just go to the announcement in terms of what we have. So we have a number of events planned for the year. For the UK chapter, we're looking at having another technical meeting in April. So just watch out, watch out for your email, and if you're a member of the UK WhatsApp group, you definitely get the information. So look out for that for that event, and then kindly register. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to having more of that. So based on today's meeting, you've attended this, which is what we had today. And I think the other event that we have for the year is the annual international conference and exhibition that takes place on the 9th to the 13th of November 2025 at Echo Hotel and Suite, Lagos. The theme is revitalizing the Nigerian petroleum exploration and production strategies for energy security and sustainable development. If you've gained a lot from this technical meeting, you would experience a whole lot more when you attend the conference, different topics from exploration all the way to development. So different topics, we encourage you to register. For those in the UK, registration fee, it's less than £100. You'll be looking at around £60 for you to register. So it's it's very cost effective, apart from your flight accommodation that you need to consider. There are a number of things that you would enjoy at this conference. There's a golf tournament, short courses, pre-conference workshop, exhibition, management sessions, technical presentations, virtual field trips, an African night, which is always the highlight of the event, and then awards ceremony. You could go on the website and to register, or you can contact me, or you can contact Dr. Iwobi, and we'll be happy to put you through. So I think that's it. Apart from even the technical meetings that NAPE UK and Europe chapter host, other chapters also host theirs. As that information comes forward, we would also let you know. We would inform you. If this is your first time also and you want to become a member of NAPE, yeah, you could speak with me. Or Mr. Iwobi, and we'll be happy to assist you with being a member, how you could register and how to pay. The fees are less than £6, £6, and for corporate members, less than £25, around £25. So if you're interested, we'll be happy to put you through. And for those who are members, this is just for us to encourage you to continue to pay your dues so that you can enjoy the privileges of being a member. There are a number of things that NAPE is working on to increase your membership benefits. So paying your dues is just one way for us to be able to deliver that. Thank you so much for attending. That's the announcement. And we just want to say thank you, a big thank you first. Thank you to the NAPE executives that have attended, right from our president to the president-elect, as well as the vice president, and also our ex-official, former chapter coordinator, and the person of Dr. Drew Beaton is also here. As well as the other executives in the UK. I think we also had another immediate past chapter coordinator that attended, Mr. Gideon Giver. He was here. And I don't know if he's still on the call. And we will also want to appreciate every one of you that have attended, especially our fellows who has contributed a lot to this association. We want to appreciate the presenter. Thank you for the presentation. That was apt, detailed, and engaging. We learned a lot. And we want to also thank the NAPE Nigeria, will I say, employees that make the association really go around and make it tick. Thank you for all you do. And also too for you attending today. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for the time. Thank you for everything. And that is it from us. We would throw open the networking session and you're free. So questions could still be responded to. You're free to say hello. And that is the end of our technical and business meeting. Have a beautiful day ahead.
Well, thank you. Alex just sent a message that he wants to have the last word. So, okay. Alex, please, if you have any other thing you want to tell us.
Yes, thank you. So it's a response to what the NAPE president said. The truth about it is the shifts into exploring the Cretaceous inland basins in Nigeria. We've seen it in the news. We've seen it across. Has been really pushed by the NNPC and NSEV, and I'd like to really thank them. You know, the fact that they were able to provide this data, they were able to gather extra data. There's a lot of information they are gathering, do you get me, to ensure that, you know, going into these areas becomes profitable. You know, you don't just want to go and do something or go and explore for oil without, they are going through the processes and they are putting out, to be able to bring the team together that did this job, you know, was exceptional by them. And I like to thank them, especially, you know, for giving the opportunity for people in industry and academia to come and carry out these research projects on behalf of them and, you know, look into securing our energy future in the country and the work they are doing across majorly the inland sedimentary basins in the country. That's all I want to say. So the shift has already started occurring over the last 10 years in terms of exploration strategy from NSERF, from first FES to NSERF, but the amount of work they are doing is commendable, and I thank them very much for this opportunity to present the work on their behalf and on behalf of the country as well, and Juvico. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. That ends the formal part of our meeting. We'll just stay around and have a chat with your friends. And thank you for attending this session. Thank you very much. And for those who are leaving, have a good day.
Yeah. So
See you next month.
Thank you, Christopher.